In the distant star system of Keveris, a once prosperous colony teetered on the edge of collapse. For centuries, the Valith, a peaceful, blue-skinned alien race, had thrived in harmony with the land, their advanced technology and deep spiritual traditions guiding them. But now, war and greed had come to their world, tearing apart the fabric of their society. The lush, verdant fields were turning to dust, and the towering crystal towers once filled with life stood abandoned, their surfaces cracked and broken. Celera moved through the desolation, her eyes scanning the ruins around her with a mix of hope and desperation. She had once been a scientist, one of the brightest minds in her community. But now she was just another wandering refugee, her clothes tattered, her hair tangled, her once proud blue skin dulled by the dirt. A heavy pack weighed on her back, filled with the last remnants of her people's knowledge. Blueprints, ancient texts, and faint hopes for survival. Her people had always been proud. Marriages between Valith were not simply about love. They were bonds of unity, alliances meant to ensure the survival of their race. But with their world crumbling, with resources dwindling and political alliances breaking, those sacred unions were no longer enough. Now, Celera had been sent on a desperate mission, one that made her feel ashamed. Yet it was the only option left. Her eyes caught sight of something unfamiliar, a small human outpost on the outskirts of what remained of a once thriving settlement. It was barely more than a collection of metal structures and solar panels, built to harness what little energy remained. Humans had begun spreading into Keveris recently, seeking opportunities in the alien world. The humans were tougher, more adaptable, but they had also begun to clash with the Valith over land and resources. Celera approached cautiously, blending into the fading shadows of a nearby rock formation. Her posture was one of humility, but inside, she seethed with the pain of her circumstances. She couldn't stay silent any longer. Her people were dying. Her people, her family, her friends, were counting on her to find a solution. And so she stepped forward into the human outpost, her voice steady, though inside she trembled. "Please," she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 lives. "I need your help. I must marry one of your people." The human standing in front of her, a tall man with rugged features and dirty work clothes, blinked in confusion. His name was Kale, a mechanic who had come to this colony to fix machines that barely functioned, keeping life support running. He wasn't used to visitors, especially not visitors from another world. His brow furrowed as he looked at the strange, pleading alien woman in front of him. "Mary," Kale repeated, leaning closer, his voice rough with skepticism. "Why? What does your people's custom have to do with me?" Celera swallowed hard, the weight of her people's fate pressing on her chest. "Our world is dying. Our leaders have decided that we must form alliances with others, humans. I need to marry someone from your people, someone who can help us survive. If I don't, if I fail, my people will be lost forever." Kale studied her, the conviction in her voice making him uneasy. He could see the sincerity in her eyes, the desperation that went beyond simple need. It was survival. But something about this plea didn't sit right with him. He didn't understand much about the Valith customs, but he knew marriage wasn't something that could be bargained over so easily. Wait a second. You're telling me that all this, that marrying one of us humans, will solve your problems?" He gestured around at the rundown outpost, frustration creeping into his voice. "That's a hell of a lot to ask. You can't just come here and make demands." "I'm not making demands," Celera said, shaking her head earnestly. "I'm asking for your help, asking if you would be willing to stand with me. We could be partners, not just in name, but in purpose. Your people could save us, Kale. I know it sounds strange, but this isn't about love. It's about survival." Kale stared at her, silent for a long moment. The weight of her words lingered in the air between them. He could feel her fear, her determination, and something else beneath it, a raw vulnerability. He had heard stories about the Valith, stories of their incredible wisdom, their connection to the land and the cosmos. But he hadn't expected to meet one like this. Someone so human, in spite of everything that separated them. And still, something about this didn't feel right. He wanted to believe her, wanted to trust in what she was saying, but marriage. It wasn't just a casual arrangement. It was serious. "I'm not sure what you're asking of me," Cale finally said, his voice soft but firm. "You want me to marry you. Just like that. You don't even know me. What if I can't? What if I'm not the right person?" Solare's eyes glimmered with hope, and she stepped closer, placing a hand gently on his arm. "You are the first human I've encountered who has shown kindness. Maybe it doesn't have to be anything beyond what we both need. You can protect me. Help me protect my people. Together, we could bring peace between our two worlds." Cale took a deep breath, his mind racing. The offer was tempting, far more complicated than it seemed at first glance. He couldn't deny the possibility, the chance to help another race, to do something meaningful in a world filled with strife. But something in the back of his mind screamed caution. Something told him this wasn't so simple. I need to think about this," Cale finally said, pulling his arm away gently. "This isn't something I can just jump into." Solare nodded, though her shoulders sagged slightly. She had expected this. Humans didn't trust easily, especially not when it came to something as serious as marriage. But she knew time was running out. The longer she waited, the harder it would be to save her people. "Take your time," she whispered. "But please, think about it. My people are counting on me. And maybe, just maybe, you could be the one to help them." Cale spent the following days pondering Solare's words, unable to shake the memory of her. The encounter had shaken him more than he'd expected. She wasn't like anyone he had ever met. Her determination, her sorrow, and the weight of her people's fate all seemed so real. Her request lingered in his mind, gnawing at the edges of his thoughts, refusing to let him be. His days in the colony were filled with the constant hum of machinery, fixing broken parts, ensuring the power grid didn't collapse completely, and keeping life support systems running. But no matter how much work he did, no matter how engrossed he became in his tasks, the image of Solare wouldn't leave him. She was like a flickering light in his mind, small but persistent. He couldn't stop thinking about what she had asked. Marry someone you barely know to save an entire race. It was wild. Ridiculous, even. But something about her pain, her hope, made it feel real. More than that, it made it feel important. Still, Cale wasn't the kind to rush into things. He had learned to be cautious. Life on Keveris had taught him that much. The humans here were used to tough choices. Survival always came first, and there wasn't much room for sentiment. Marrying an alien, no matter how desperate the circumstances, was something that couldn't be taken lightly. He spent hours debating with himself, trying to make sense of it all. Could he really do this? Could he, a mechanic with no ties to any grand cause, step into something so big, so life-altering? Marrying someone he barely knew, someone from another world, someone who wasn't human. It felt overwhelming. One evening, after finishing a long shift fixing solar panels, Cale walked along the edge of the outpost, letting his mind wander. The sunset painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, casting long shadows across the landscape. He breathed in the cool air, the distant hum of machinery in the background fading into quiet. It was peaceful, too peaceful for the kind of thoughts swirling in his mind. "Why does it matter to me so much?" Cale muttered to himself, running a hand through his short, dark hair. "I got my own life to think about. Why am I even considering this?" But deep down, he knew the answer. It wasn't just Solare's plea that had moved him. It was her determination, the weight of her burden. She wasn't just asking for help. She was reaching out to him. Someone she barely knew, someone who could give her what she needed to save her people. And part of him couldn't ignore that. As he stood there lost in thought, a voice behind him startled him, pulling him from his musings. "You're still thinking about it, aren't you?" Kale spun around to find Solara standing a few feet away, her eyes gentle but full of expectation. She had the same determined expression from before, but now there was a softer edge to her, as if she understood his hesitation. Cal's chest tightened. "I don't know what to think," he admitted honestly. "It's a lot to take in. Marrying someone I barely know. Marrying someone who's not even human. It's not something I can just decide overnight." Solara stepped closer, her gaze steady. "I understand. It's a lot to ask. I wouldn't come here unless I truly believed we could make this work." She paused for a moment, her voice softening. "But it's not just about us. It's about my people, my family. If I don't secure this marriage, we're running out of time. I'm asking you to help us, not just for your sake, but for the sake of those who can't help themselves." Kel's jaw tightened. He couldn't deny the truth in her words. He didn't want to be dragged into something this complicated, but something about her sincerity made it hard to look away. Her people were desperate. This wasn't a small request. It was bigger than both of them. "I still don't know if I'm the right person," Kale said, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm not a hero, Solara. I'm just me. I don't have any grand ideas of saving worlds. I barely know how to fix this colony, let alone make a difference on a cosmic scale." Solara smiled gently, but it wasn't a smile of pity. There was strength behind it. "That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking you to stand with me. We can learn from each other. Together, we can be more than what we are alone. You don't have to be a hero. You just have to be willing to help." Cal's eyes narrowed as he thought carefully about her words. There was something about her that made it impossible to dismiss her plea. She wasn't just desperate. There was conviction in her. And despite his doubts, despite the overwhelming responsibility, he couldn't ignore the pull inside him, urging him to at least consider it further. "I need time," Kale said finally. "I need to think this through. I'm not saying no, but I can't agree to something this big without knowing more." Solara's expression softened, and she nodded. "I understand. You need to make your own choice. I'll give you that time. But please, don't take too long. Every moment counts." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Kale alone once again. But this time, the uncertainty in his mind was even stronger. Could he really step into something so huge? Could he trust that he was the one who could make a difference? As the days passed, Kale knew he had to make a decision soon, because whether he agreed or not, Solara's mission was bigger than just one person. It was a chance to change the course of two worlds. And the longer he waited, the more he felt the weight of the responsibility falling on his shoulders. Kale couldn't get Solara out of his mind. She wasn't like anyone he'd ever met, determined, vulnerable, and strangely familiar despite her alien nature. Her eyes had haunted him, filled with a mix of hope and desperation, as though she carried the weight of her people on her shoulders. The more he thought about her request, the more conflicted he felt. Back at the outpost, life continued as usual, humans going about their routines, fixing equipment, and trying to make do with what little they had. But Cal couldn't shake the image of Solara, the alien woman standing before him, pleading for help. He knew that marrying her wasn't something simple. It wasn't about romance. It wasn't about love. It was about survival. Hers, and maybe even his. One evening, Cal found himself walking along the edge of the outpost once again, staring out into the vastness of Keveris night sky. The stars shimmered like distant gemstones. The galaxy stretched far and wide, filled with possibilities and danger. It was overwhelming. But one thing was clear. Solara had stirred something deep inside him, something he couldn't ignore. He couldn't shake the feeling that their meeting had been more than coincidence. There was a pull between them, something neither of them fully understood, but it made Cal wonder, what if there was more to this than just saving her people? Suddenly, he heard footsteps approaching. He turned around, and there she was again. Solara, standing quietly a few feet away, her expression calm but expectant. She had a presence about her that seemed to demand attention, but at the same time, she carried herself with humility, as though she wasn't forcing anything, just asking for what she needed. Still thinking about it, Solara asked softly, her voice carrying over the soft night breeze. Kale exhaled slowly, nodding. Yeah, I can't seem to get you out of my head. Solara smiled gently, but it wasn't a triumphant smile. It was quiet, as though she understood his internal struggle. You don't have to decide right away. But I want you to know, this isn't just about me. This is about more than one person. This is about a people, a whole world that's falling apart. Kale sighed, looking away for a moment. The weight of her words pressed heavily on him. I don't know much about your world, Solara. I don't know if I'm even capable of helping you the way you need. But I want to understand. I want to know more. Solara's eyes softened, and she stepped a little closer, her voice lowering, gentle but firm. Then let me show you. Let me take you into our world, the Valith world. You'll see what I see, feel what I feel. Maybe then you'll understand why I'm asking this of you. Kale raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Show me. What do you mean? Solara took a deep breath, as though bracing herself, before offering a small smile. You'll need to trust me, just for a short time. Come with me to my people's home. I'll show you what's happening. Show you the pain, the struggle. You'll see why this isn't just a matter of survival. It's a matter of hope. Kale hesitated, his mind racing. He didn't know what to expect, but part of him felt a strange pull, an eagerness to see what lay beyond his world, beyond the colony he called home. He didn't fully understand what Solara wanted, but something inside him told him to trust her, if only a little. All right, Kale finally said, nodding slowly. Take me. I'll come with you. I want to see for myself. Solara's eyes lit up slightly, but she maintained her calm demeanor. Good, but be warned, what you'll see won't be easy. It's not a place filled with hope yet. It's a place where every day is a struggle just to survive. With that, Solara led Kale away from the outpost and into the wilderness. Kiveris stretched endlessly around them, a harsh and unforgiving world, dotted with towering rocks, shimmering rivers, and fields that had once been green but now lay brown and withered. The air was thick with tension, and Kale couldn't help but feel the weight of the place settle on him. As they walked, Solara began to explain her people's plight. The resource wars that had divided the Valith, the depletion of energy that had left cities in darkness, and the political chaos that had spiraled into open conflict. Her voice was steady, but Kale could hear the weariness in her tone. The exhaustion of fighting a losing battle, of watching her people suffer. These aren't just stories, Solara said softly. This is what we live every day. Our world is falling apart because we don't have enough. The peace we once knew is gone. We can't sustain ourselves anymore. That's why I came here, because I need help. And you could be the one to offer that help. Kale listened, absorbing her words, but the more he learned, the heavier his chest felt. He had always been used to scraping by on what little he had, but what he saw before him, what Solara showed him, was something far more dire. This wasn't just another struggle. It was a fight for existence, and she wasn't asking for pity. She was asking for something far more profound. As they continued walking, Kale's thoughts churned. He had never imagined his life would intersect with something like this. Alien struggles, alien worlds, alien pain. Yet here he was, deep in it, sharing Solara's burden whether he wanted to or not. You didn't just come here to ask for marriage, Kale said after a long silence. You came here to find someone who can stand by you, someone who can believe in your cause. Solara nodded slowly. Yes, I came here to find someone who isn't afraid to look beyond what's easy, to see the truth of what my people are facing. I didn't expect you to be that person, but maybe you are. Kale exhaled, processing everything she had said. Her words stirred something inside him, an unfamiliar sense of purpose. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was standing at the edge of something important. As days turned into nights, Kale found himself deep in the heart of Valeth territory, walking alongside Solara through forests that shimmered with strange, bioluminescent plants. The air was thick with unfamiliar scents, and the ground beneath their feet pulsed with energy, an energy unlike anything he had ever encountered. Keveris wasn't just another colony. It was alive in ways Cal had never imagined. The further they traveled, the more Cal understood what Solara had meant when she spoke of the Valeth struggle. The signs of decay were everywhere: crumbling roads, shattered crystals, and buildings half collapsed, their once brilliant designs now faded and tarnished. The energy that once powered their cities had all but vanished, and it was clear that the Valeth had grown desperate. Yet, despite the desolation, Cal could feel something deeper, something stronger than mere survival. The Valeth still clung to their traditions, their sense of unity, and their belief that their connection to the land was enough to sustain them. They weren't ready to give up. Not entirely. Solara led him through winding paths until they reached a hidden gathering place, surrounded by towering trees with leaves that shimmered under the faint light of two moons. Here, in this quiet grove, Kale finally saw the true heart of the Valeth. Small communities gathered together, their faces etched with exhaustion, but their spirits still burning. They spoke softly in their native tongue, tending to plants, repairing ancient machinery, and weaving together fabrics from the remains of what was left. Solara introduced Kale to the elders, wise beings with deep golden eyes, their skin marked by lines of age and wisdom. They listened to Kale carefully, their expressions calm but knowing. They spoke of their people's plight, of how their world had once flourished, only to be brought low by greed and war. The Valeth had always believed in balance, between technology and nature, between the cosmos and the land. But that balance was gone, and now they were on the brink of collapse. You see, Solara explained as they gathered around a fire later that evening, our people have always lived in harmony, peaceful, connected to the land and each other. But with resources dwindling, the factions have grown desperate. We fought among ourselves, divided ourselves over what little remains. This world that we once cherished, our home, is dying. Kale sat quietly, listening intently. He could feel the weight of her words, the weight of her people's plight. They weren't just asking for help, they were begging for survival. And now, he was in the middle of it. The more he learned, the clearer it became. Solara wasn't looking for someone to save her. It was the other way around. She had been sent here to save everyone. You're not just here for help, Kale finally said after a pause. You've been sent to find someone who can help you save your world. Solara nodded slowly, her eyes locked on his. Yes, my people are counting on me. And if I can't find someone who's willing to help, someone who can understand what's at stake, then we will have no choice but to give in to the inevitable. Her voice dropped to a whisper. But I believe you could be that person. I believe you could help us rebuild, not just physically, but spiritually. You don't have to be someone extraordinary, just someone willing to stand by us, to believe in what we're fighting for. Kale leaned forward, his brow furrowed. I don't know if I'm that person, Solara. I'm just a mechanic from a human outpost. What do I know about saving the world? I'm used to fixing machines, not fixing people's lives. Solara smiled softly, placing a hand gently on his arm. You don't have to be anyone but yourself. That's all I ask. You have something that we've lost, something we could learn from. You're strong, capable, and willing to listen. That's enough. For the first time since he'd met her, Kale felt the weight of the situation truly settle on him. The Valeth weren't asking for miracles. They were asking for something simple, but profound. Partnership. They needed someone who could see past their differences, someone who could bring understanding. And though Kale still had his doubts, he couldn't shake the feeling that perhaps, just perhaps, This was something he could be a part of. I don't know if I'm the right person, Kale admitted after a long silence. But I'm willing to try. I'll stay. I'll see what I can do to help. Selara's eyes brightened, and a smile, a true smile, spread across her face. That's all I ask. Together, we can find a way. Together, we can bring peace to our worlds. The fire crackled between them, casting shadows on their faces. Kale felt a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. A feeling that, despite all the odds stacked against them, they might have a chance. A chance to not just save Solara's people, but to rebuild something lasting. As they sat there, surrounded by the quiet resilience of the Valeth, Kale knew that the decision before him wasn't just about helping someone in need. It was about stepping into something much bigger, a journey that could change not only his life, but the lives of countless others. And as he looked at Solara, he realized he didn't feel afraid. He felt ready. Days turned into weeks as Kale fully immersed himself in the life of the Valeth. He worked alongside the people, repairing broken machines, gathering energy crystals from hidden caverns, and learning the art of weaving strength from the fragile remains of their world. The more he learned, the more he realized how deeply intertwined the Valeth were with their land, their energy, and their very existence. Solara had been right. There was hope here, a quiet determination, a refusal to give up, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The Valeth weren't simply fighting to survive. They were fighting to rebuild what had been lost. Their connection to the land wasn't just spiritual, it was essential. And now, Kale was beginning to understand why they needed his help. One afternoon, as Kale worked alongside a group of younger Valeth, they spoke about the ancient stories of their ancestors, tales of unity, strength, and the balance between technology and nature. They spoke of energy crystals, which once pulsed with life, nourishing the land and powering their world. These crystals had been used to build cities, sustain agriculture, and keep the peace. But now, with so few remaining, even the most basic needs had become impossible to meet. The crystals are fading, one of the elders explained. What we once had in abundance, we now guard carefully, because they are all we have left to sustain our energy. They feed our machines, our homes, and our lives. Without them, the land will die, and we will perish. Kale listened carefully, taking in every word. He could see the truth in their words. The world wasn't just dying, it was starving, and the Valeth couldn't restore it alone. You can't do this without help, Kale said after a moment. Not without more resources. Not without. Solara stepped into the conversation, her expression thoughtful but serious. You're right. We've already tried to trade for what we need. Other worlds, humans, offered us scraps. But what we need isn't scraps. What we need is strength. True allies who understand our way of life, and who can work with us, not against us. Kale furrowed his brow. And you think I can bring that? Solara's gaze locked onto his. I believe you can, because you're not just from another world. You're from a world that's thrived. You've built things we once had but lost. Machines, structures, ways of surviving. And you're not afraid to get your hands dirty. She paused, her voice softening. You've already proven that you're not like the others. You're someone who can listen, who can learn. Someone who can see past the surface. Kale exhaled slowly, processing her words. He'd never considered himself as anything more than a mechanic, someone who fixed broken machines and kept to himself. Yet here, among the Valeth, his skills were valuable. His perspective was needed. And more than that, they needed more than just machinery. They needed someone who could inspire others, someone who could rebuild not just tools, but trust. There's something else, Solara continued, her expression growing serious again. We've learned from the few humans who've crossed into our world. There are factions within your people, those who see us as threats, as obstacles. They've tried to take from us, steal our resources, and they don't care about the consequences. We need someone who can speak for both worlds, someone who can bridge that gap. Cal's stomach tightened. He hadn't thought much about his own people, not since he'd left the outpost. But what Solara described wasn't surprising. Humanity had always been divided. Some focused on survival, others on expansion, others on power. It wasn't hard to imagine there were those who saw the Valeth as nothing more than a resource to exploit. I don't know if I can stop people like that, Cal admitted. I'm just one person. And if humans, if my own people, see you as enemies, how can I change that? Solara reached out and placed a gentle hand on his arm. That's why you don't have to do this alone. We'll fight together. We'll show them that there's more at stake than just what lies on the surface. That our worlds, yours and ours, are more alike than they think. We can build something new, something that benefits both of us. Cal stared at her, considering her words. He wasn't used to thinking this way. He was used to focusing on what was practical, what was achievable with limited resources. Yet here, with Solara, it wasn't just about survival. It was about something greater. He couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't as impossible as it seemed. Maybe, just maybe, he could be part of something that truly mattered. I'll do my best, Cal said after a long pause. But I need to know more. I need to know everything. The good, the bad, and the things that aren't so obvious. Solara nodded. Then it's time you meet others, those who have stood with us before, those who've helped us in the past. They might be able to guide you, teach you more about our ways, and show you how to navigate this. That evening, Solara led Cal to a hidden sanctuary deep within the Valeth forests. It was a place few outsiders had ever seen, a place where ancient wisdom had been preserved. It was a quiet, sacred space, filled with ancient artifacts, murals, and ancient energy crystals still glowing faintly. Here, they'd met the keepers, the protectors of Valeth knowledge, old beings with deep eyes and stories that seemed to stretch back to the beginning of time. They welcomed Cal with a mixture of curiosity and cautious respect, sensing something different about him, something more than the average traveler. We have been expecting you. One of the elders, an ancient female with silver hair and a calm voice, said. Not all who arrive here have the eyes to see what lies beneath. But you have already begun to glimpse it. Cal's heart raced. I don't understand. What am I supposed to see? You are meant to be more than a bystander, the elder replied. You are here to help bring unity, to help restore what has been lost. We will show you the way, show you how to harness the remaining energy, how to repair what has been broken. And more importantly, we will show you how to build bridges between worlds. Cal's mind swirled with the weight of their words. He had no idea what he was walking into, but the more he listened, the more he realized this wasn't just a mission. It was a calling, and he couldn't walk away. Not now. This is bigger than I thought, Cal said quietly. But I want to do this. I'll see it through. Solara smiled, a soft glow in her eyes. Good. Together, we can make this happen. Together, we can restore not just our world, but yours too. Cal took a deep breath, his resolve hardening. The path ahead wasn't clear, but one thing was certain. He had found a purpose, and it would take everything he had to see it through. The days turned into weeks, and as Cal immersed himself further into the life of the Valeth, he began to see just how fragile their world had become. The energy crystals, once abundant, were now dwindling. The few that remained had to be guarded fiercely, as they were all that sustained the life of the planet. Without them, the machines that powered the cities, the farms that provided food, and the very essence of the land itself would continue to decay. Cal had learned much about the Valeth ways, how they connected to the energy in everything around them, drawing strength from the land, from the remnants of ancient technology, and even from their shared memories. It wasn't just machinery they protected. It was their way of life, their heritage, and their hope for the future. One afternoon, Kale found himself in a gathering with the keepers once again, the ancient elders who held the deepest knowledge of Valeth history and technology. They had gathered in a circular chamber deep beneath the surface of Keveris, where the oldest crystals pulsed faintly in the shadows. The keepers spoke in hushed, deliberate tones, their voices resonating with age and wisdom. "The time has come for us to take action," one of the elders said. "We can no longer wait. The energy that powers our world is fading faster than we thought, and the factions, those who seek to take what they can, are growing stronger." Kale listened carefully, his mind racing as the weight of their words sank in. The Valeth weren't just struggling. They were on the verge of collapse. The longer the world's energy reserves diminished, the more likely it was that conflict would erupt, and everything they had worked for would be lost. "But what can we do?" Kale asked. "It feels like everything is slipping through our fingers." The elder nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing with determination. "There is one last hope, one way to restore balance, but it will require more than machines, more than strength. It will require a union, a joining of forces between your people and ours." Kale's brows furrowed. "My people? You mean the humans?" "Yes. Only by forging a true alliance between our two worlds can we hope to bring enough resources, enough energy, to heal what has been broken." Kale swallowed hard. That's a tall order. Human outposts have little to spare, and many see you as something to exploit. The elder's expression darkened. "That is why we need someone who can change their view, someone who can speak for both sides, someone who understands both worlds. Someone like you." Kale took a deep breath, feeling the growing weight on his shoulders. He hadn't signed up to be some sort of ambassador between worlds. He was just a mechanic, someone used to fixing things that were broken, not negotiating between civilizations. But the keeper's words wouldn't leave his mind. "Why me?" Kale asked. "I'm just one person." The elder's gaze sharpened. "Because you've seen both sides. You've come from a place where humans have thrived, where technology has advanced, but you've also lived among us, seen what we've lost. You understand the value of both worlds, of nature, of energy, of unity. You have the eyes to see beyond the surface, to find common ground where others only see division." Kale sighed, his mind spinning. He wasn't a diplomat. He didn't know how to convince people of anything. He was used to getting his hands dirty, working with machines. Yet the more he thought about it, the more he realized there wasn't much time left. "I don't know the first thing about politics," Kale admitted, "or how to talk to humans who don't understand what you're going through." "You don't have to do this alone," Solara said quietly, stepping forward. "We'll help guide you. We'll show you how to build trust, how to show them what's at stake. It won't be easy, but it's the only way." Kale stared at her, uncertain. He had no experience in something like this, negotiating between worlds. But the weight of the Valeth situation pressed heavily on him. He couldn't just sit back and do nothing. Not now, not when they were so close to losing everything. "I'll try," Kale said finally, his voice firm. "I don't know if I'll succeed, but I'll give it everything I've got." The elder nodded. "That's all we can ask for. Every journey begins with the first step." With the keeper's guidance, Kale prepared himself for what lay ahead. He had to travel to the nearest human outpost, an area where tensions between different factions were high. Some humans had begun to scavenge resources from other planets, seeing the Valeth as little more than a threat to be dealt with. But there were others, those who might be swayed if only someone could show them that both worlds could benefit from cooperation. As Kale packed a small supply of tools, Solara approached him once again. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her eyes filled with quiet resolve. "Be careful," she said softly. "It won't be easy. But I believe in you. You have the strength, the heart, and the resolve. You can make a difference." Kale looked at her, determination hardening in his gaze. "I'll come back with something, Solara. I'll find a way to bring them together. I promise." The next morning, Kale set out on his journey, leaving the comfort of the Valith lands behind and heading into the unknown. His mission wasn't just about forging alliances. It was about survival. The future of two worlds depended on him, and he couldn't fail. As he walked, Cale knew that everything had changed. He wasn't just fixing machines anymore. He was fixing a broken world, one that desperately needed more than just repair.